What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console game podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 56. Hope you guys are all doing well out there, and I want to wish you all, since I'm recording this on Friday afternoon, hence the sunlight coming in, though I realize there's like no light on this side, so if you're watching the video version of this, my lighting is pretty bad, but you know, it's what you get for this low budget production setup I got going on here. But that said, today is March 10th, and it is officially Mario Day. So I want to wish you and yours out there a very happy Mario Day. I know there's a bunch of like Switch deals going on and like all the major retailers. So if you haven't picked up some of these great Mario games that are on Switch, I mean, what better time than now? So happy Mario Day to all of you. For me, it's kind of been a busy week, a little bit slower week in terms of news, except for yesterday. Like, I feel like there were a bunch of like random announcements that came out as I was like putting notes together for the show and kind of picking the topics and stuff that I wanted to cover. You get all these random things that kind of just shadow drop on you, and it's like, what is it? Why is like Thursday the news day? It's weird. But that aside, it's been a busy week for me, like personally with work and stuff around the house. And then, of course, I'm always trying to squeeze golf in when I can. You know, worst case scenario, just hit the range. So it is, man. Life's hectic, but, you know, that's just the way things go. But, you know, one thing, speaking of Mario, as I was thinking about this, Nintendo released a new Mario trailer yesterday at the time of this recording. It's like the final trailer before the movie releases, and kind of thinking about it, the movie's only like a few weeks away, which is wild. April 5th, it's coming up quick, which I'm super excited for. The new trailer looks awesome. However, Donkey Kong talks more in this trailer, and I'm becoming less and less of a fan of Seth Rogen doing that. Like, it's just Seth Rogen. It's not, like, it's not actually Donkey Kong. But either way, I'm so stoked for this movie. I think outside of that, it looks absolutely awesome. And my wife and I just got tickets for the family, so we can go. We're going to go see it April 6th, I think is what it is. So I'm so looking forward to this, and I'm really excited to take my son to this because as I mentioned before, like, this Mario I have such a soft spot for Nintendo and Mario. I mean, I grew up with it. I've been playing Mario games my entire life. Clearly, as you can see, if you're watching the video version, I've got my amiibo collection behind me. I like Nintendo, and I always will like Nintendo. And so now being able to share my love and passion for Nintendo via this movie with my son, and he's super into like this style and animated movies, as I think most kids are. I'm stoked, and I just super looking forward to it. So cannot wait to go see on that. I'm sure we'll be talking about it here on the show after I go see it, which is going to be just awesome. That movie is going to make so much money. It's not even funny. Like, I would not be surprised if it is the top grossing film of the year and probably one of the top grossing films of all time. I don't know. I mean, it's Mario plus an animated movie for kids. Like, kids movies do so well. Dude, I don't know. It's going to be really exciting. Another thing I wanted to say right here at the top is I got to apologize. So episode number 54, so 2 episodes ago from this, the video version on YouTube was just like the first 8 minutes or so of the episode, because there must have been some sort of file corruption in my video export that I didn't catch when I uploaded it to YouTube. So sorry about that. If you consistently watch the YouTube versions of the podcast, that that wasn't a good episode, and I promise you it was much longer than that. I'm pretty sure we went for well over an hour as we normally do. But I did confirm, at least from what I could tell, the audio version was just fine. So, you know, podcast services seem to be going great, but I wanted to apologize for that. And I know there's a few of you out there whom I appreciate consistently checking out the YouTube videos. So my bad on that one. Need to have some better quality controls, I guess. But again, low budget production is just me. You know, we're trying to get things done, but I let that one slip through the cracks. So my sincere apologies about that. Now, I think we got a jam-packed episode. But before we get into any of that stuff, for those of you that are new to the show, and I know there's a few of you out there, I see you. Welcome to the show. And if you're curious about what the best way you can do to support the show is, leave us nice reviews and share the show with your friends. Whatever podcast service platform that you're listening on, all the reviews, comments, all that stuff just gets us into the algorithms, helps people find the show better. So any of that stuff that you can do is greatly appreciated. You can find me across all the major, social media platforms. Got a Facebook page. You can catch me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. Video versions of the show go up on both YouTube and Rumble, so you can check those episodes out. And also, I put up a clips channel. So I started a clips channel, and the name, I did not write the name down. The name totally escapes me. Let me look it up. I'm pretty sure it's, Gamecite Chronicles clips. Duh, I should know this. That's embarrassing. But I did start the new clips channel, Gamecite Chronicles clips. You can search for that in YouTube. And so if you're not able to catch the full episodes of the show, I'm trying to put up some of the best various different segments or important segments in both YouTube short and kind of long form video up on that channel. So you can check that out. Appreciate some subscriptions over there so we can get that channel up and running and going. As all kind of my main clips that I've been doing on my regular YouTube channel, we're just going to save the regular YouTube channel for podcast episodes as well as recent pickups and the occasional unboxing will go there. But all the clips are going to go on the now dedicated clips channel. So check that out. Link will be in the description, of course. And you can catch new episodes each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, as we do every episode, today's episode's drink is Red Bull. Since it is an afternoon, I love energy drinks. Red Bull is by far my favorite. That's what we're drinking today. And I've just decided to embrace this. So I'm pretty sure every episode we're just going to, what are we drinking? What's the drink of the show? Let's make that a thing. Or at least I decided I'm going to make it a thing. It's my show. I can do what I want. But that aside, we got a jam-packed show. I think we got lots of things to talk about, and it's going to be Xbox focused. I think I'm going to try to look at the Xbox through more of a positive light. There's been a couple news items about Xbox, but I want to talk about a handful of games, 5 of them, and talk about where are they? What's going on with these games? Because they're pretty big games, I think, for the Xbox ecosystem, coming from the first-party studio lineup, which includes Bethesda. And so it's what's going on here? What happened to these games? And so I want to review them. Done a little bit of research, some digging into them, and I'm excited to jump into that and try to look at Xbox through a more positive light. Because I know I've been very critical of Xbox, especially during the Activision Blizzard deal with Game Pass. But I do think, and I was kind of thinking about this, I was getting prepared for the show and kind of catching myself up on some of these games. There is some really cool games that I think gives Xbox fans something to be excited for. And if they can start to deliver these types of things consistently, then I think we can start to see the ship of Xbox kind of turn around, despite all of its, consumer goodwill and the incredible value with Game Pass. So we're going to be diving into that. There are also a couple smaller news items I wanted to touch on. So there was a gameplay trailer for Dead Island 2 I want to give some thoughts on. A listener actually on the last episode, when I was talking about the Activision Blizzard deal, left me a lengthy response and a really good response. So I want to kind of respond to that because he made some salient points that I wanted to address and kind of, I told him I would respond here on the next episode. So I want to dedicate a little segment to that. And then big news for Starfield as we finally got a release date. So we'll touch on that and I'll share my thoughts on that. Another thing that doesn't really warrant its own segment around a news item, but I wanted to give it a shout out because I really recommend you check it out. So that new Robocop game, Robocop Rogue City, which is a first-person shooter. It's coming out. I think it got delayed. Now it's coming out, I think, towards September, if my notes here are accurate. And they dropped this new trailer with this kind of release window announcement. It's 2 minutes or so, and it shows off some gameplay. But I'm watching this trailer, and I found it absolutely hilarious because it looks good, when you're not moving. The graphics and everything, I think, look pretty great. But then you can tell it's kind of that budgety, maybe single A, double A style game with its gameplay. And it's kind of almost feels like it has some jank, but not necessarily in a completely negative way, more of like a funny way. Because there's various scenes where he's kind of walking around, you see some criminals and stuff like that as you're walking around Detroit City. And then Robocop knocks on this door. I think he's doing like a drug bust. And when he talks in his like Robocop robot voice, it's just very almost kind of takes you out of the immersion. It's just funny. And then he like busts the door down and it's like all slow-mo. And then he gets out his gun and then it's like first person shooter. It's like a shooter and you're just shooting, like blowing these guys. And it's pretty graphic in terms of like people like just getting blown away. And he kind of walks a little stiff. I mean, he's a robot, so I guess it makes sense, but he's walking stiff and he's like blasting people. And I'm like, what is this game? Because it almost comes across like this open world game to where like you can maybe go do missions, like bust some criminals and stuff like that. But on the other end, it's like maybe it's kind of linear and you just mission based. I don't know, but it's hilarious. There's even one moment where Robocop goes up to this dude and just like uppercuts him, just like bah, and it's like blood everywhere. The guy's like flying back and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this game is hilarious. And I have a feeling it's not going to be that great. Though their last game they did, I think, was Terminator Resistance, which is, another licensed title, kind of in that single A space, that apparently was pretty good. I think I actually have a copy of it for Xbox, believe it or not, because that game, the physical version of that game was hard to find and it like increased in value. And I think I ended up picking up for like $40 when it was going for like 60 or $70. So, and supposedly that game's actually pretty decent in terms of like a first person shooter. So maybe they've got something else here with RoboCop, but I was just watching this trailer, like laughing out loud because it's like, it's janky, but it's also hilarious. So go check it out. It's the newest RoboCop Rogue City trailer. I think you might get a kick out of it. It's good. Now, before we get into some of those news items, let's talk about the games that we're playing. And as always, as I mentioned, I want to hear from you guys. What games have you been playing? Let me know, like friend of the show, Rob did, who said he is playing a smaller Game Pass title called Merge and Blade from Magic Cube Games. He says it's pretty addictive and he highly recommends it. And I was actually looking this game up because I think I remember seeing this game, and it's described as an addictive puzzle and a massive auto battler. Now, I've never played one of those auto battler games or like kind of automated, battle type games. I know there's a couple of them out there. I think they're more prominent on this PC space. But it looks really interesting. It's kind of got that, I don't know, 16-bit, almost between 8 and 16-bit art style, very pixelated, which is great. And I could see this game being kind of addictive. And I was kind of watching this trailer and I was like, I have no idea what's going on, if I'm being honest. But I like puzzle games, and I don't know if this game I could be into, but it might be something to put on the old wish, or I guess not wish list, but the download list, since it's on Game Pass. It's got on Steam, it's got mostly positive reviews, so that's pretty cool. And it's awesome to hear. It looks interesting, I must say. Looks like it's also chapter based as you move through levels and stuff like that. So I don't know, pretty cool. Glad you're enjoying that game. For the rest of you out there, let me know, what are you playing? As for me, you probably already know what I've been playing because it hasn't really changed the last several weeks, but that's Hogwarts Legacy. I'm about 35-ish, maybe a little bit more hours in. No, I'm in the 40s. I think it might be like 45 hours, close to 45 hours. I've been trying to put in some time to this game. So yeah, I think I'm in the mid 40-ish hours into this game. I'm still very much enjoying it. I got bogged down with, doing the checkbox type activities, some of the side quests, but now it's like, I'm trying to ring it in. I was like, okay, I need to progress the story, do some of these main quests. And there's some like side character stories that you kind of do longer quests through, and I've been doing some of those. So I'm really trying to progress through this game. As much as I'm enjoying it, there are so many other things that I want to play. I kind of just want to get through this game now. I don't think I'm going to go for the platinum just because there's so many collectibles and there's so much that I think it would probably take me like 70 hours to do everything. And there's too much to play right now. That's not in the cards. But I finally experienced some of my first like real bugs in this game. So there was one dungeon I was going through and a section that I got some really bad frame drops. Things were just kind of chugging. And I had to actually reload a save because I couldn't progress through the dungeon because something wasn't loading right. So I had to experience that. Again, super minor, but nonetheless, there are still some bugs out there. And I think they've just put out a patch for it. But I didn't realize this at the time because I was just organically, I saw this person that had a quest for me and I started talking to them and started doing that quest. And it was actually the PlayStation exclusive Hogsmeade quest that they had advertised coming with the PlayStation version of the game. And it was actually pretty cool. And the whole shtick of it is essentially is that you meet this, what is it? Elf character. They're elves. Yeah. For some reason I was thinking goblins. No, they're elves. And they talk about how their original owner is selling their shop and they can sell it to you. And so you end up buying this shop, but then when you go in, you get kind of sucked into this dungeon and it ends up being like this big trap and all this stuff. And you end up fighting like this ghost and you go through this really weird, very long, weird section of a dungeon. It actually kind of reminded me of the ashtray maze from Control. So if you've ever played that game, you know what I'm talking about. Because it was really, really weird, very mysterious, kind of dark, almost creepy at times. So it was actually kind of cool and got through that. And at the end, now you have your own shop. You can sell items through this shop and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. And I would highly recommend, if you have the PlayStation version of it, go do this quest. I think it pops up maybe towards the later part of the game. I have to assume I'm getting pretty deep into this game. I don't know how much more I have left to do, but nonetheless, that was really cool. So I wanted to give that a shout out. But yeah, my plan is I don't know how much I'm going to be able to play this upcoming weekend, but I really want to get through the rest of this game and just kind of beat the campaign, beat the story, and then kind of move on. Because the next game I want to play is Hi-Fi Rush. I've been talking about it for the last several weeks. We're going to talk about it probably some more today as we dive into Xbox. And I gotta get to that game. I want to see if it resonates with me. It's also a shorter title, which the last couple of games that I've played, and I was looking at my list of games, that I've played in 2022, have been like open world RPG big games, and I'm like, I kind of need a linear palette cleanser style game, and I feel like Hi-Fi Rush could be that. So there's that. Also, I'll plan to play some more PSVR 2. Haven't really played this past week, so that is kind of what it is. But it's calling my name, and I want to get back to it. And again, I want to try to build up that tolerance too, so I don't continue to get motion sickness. So that's what I got. That's what I've been playing. Oh, actually, I thought about one other thing before we move on to the next segment. I downloaded the Sea of Stars demo on my Switch Lite. Figured I'd play this. So I plan on playing that as well. I've heard nothing but good things about that. That game is going to be huge. Look it up. Sea of Stars. It looks awesome. It's like Chrono Trigger inspired, turn-based RPG. It looks amazing. Comes out on PlayStation, Switch, and PC. I think it's August 29th, if I'm not mistaken. But they got a demo up on Switch. I have to imagine the demo will go up on PlayStation, but I wanted to try it out. So that is also another game on my docket. Man, there's just so many games, man. So many games in so little time. Okay, so let's dive into some of the smaller news items. First up is Dead Island 2. So as I mentioned, I think it was about a week ago or so, they put up a trailer for Dead Island 2, and it's an extended gameplay trailer. So the shows off about 15 minutes or so of gameplay. They kind of talk about some of the mechanics and some of the things like that. And so I got to say, it looks really good. I'm actually quite impressed by what I'm seeing. So the trailer shows off various detailed kills and kind of gore. What do they call it? Their flesh system is what it is. And so it gives you a variety of ways to take down zombies, like shooting off legs, chopping off heads. I mean, stuff that you'd kind of expect, but they're brought a little bit more realism into it. I think depending on where and how you hit the zombies with various different items, they're going to react differently. And it's very, very gory, lots of blood. It looks pretty intense. And I wouldn't say it's anything groundbreaking, but it does look very good from what I saw in the trailer here. One of the things I noticed too was there's a lot of kind of the original moves that you would expect to see from the original Dead Island as well as Dying Light, such as the way you dodge. It's kind of I don't know how to describe it, but it seems very distinct to those style of games. It's the same here from what I can tell, and then you can drop kick zombies, which is always a good time. So it seems like they're keeping some of that kind of traditional gameplay mechanics in this game, which is great to see. They talked about how you can upgrade your weapons and do kind of a lot of basically create some new weapons with a variety of different tools and stuff like that, which from what I remember in the first Dead Island was a huge part of that game, such as like taking a baseball bat and putting a flamethrower at the end of it, or, some sort of like saw and then putting some electrical components on it. And that's something that I really felt was missing from Dying Light 2. Dying Light had this and it was great. Dead Island had this. Dying Light 2 kind of had it. It wasn't the same. It wasn't as good. And I felt like they kind of shoehorned some RPG light mechanics in there that, in my opinion, just didn't really work with the game. But this seems like they're kind of getting back to how it worked originally, which I think is a huge win. It's something I really liked, and I think is an absolute plus for this game. And then they talked about different ways you can enhance your abilities. It's through this card system, which that's like the one thing I'm like, I'm not big on these like card systems, which is one of the reasons why I never got into Back for Blood, because they have this whole like card mechanic system that I don't know. I'm just not really into that. I know some people enjoy it, but it's not really for me. So that's like the one thing where I'm like, this is where you went wrong, but we'll see how it plays out. Maybe it surprises me. And then they also showed off a Fury mode, as they call it, which basically allows you to unlock different abilities from the undead, because in this game, unsurprisingly, you're immune to the zombie apocalypse. And it kind of reminded me of similar to Dying Light 2. In that very similar mechanic was in that game. Wasn't really a big fan of it. So that's another one where I'm like, man, like, do we need this? Come on. Again, we'll see, but I'm not really a big fan of that. And then another thing they spotlighted was a variety of different zombies, which you'd expect, but it seemed like they had a good amount of different types of zombies and then kind of variants of those types of zombies. So looked pretty cool. And hopefully it's enough to kind of keep the game fresh as you explore the various areas of Los Angeles and kind of go throughout the campaign and side quests and stuff like that. So I got to say, man, this game looks great. I think it looks really, really good. And from what I can tell, for the most part, it seems to capture what I liked about the first Dead Island. And it's got some updates, maybe some more modernized mechanics. A couple things that I'm not the biggest fan of, like the card system, the zombie thing, or the zombie powers or whatever. But other than that, like, I'm very intrigued by this game. I don't know if it's going to be a day one purchase. It's certainly on my roadmap, but I don't know about a day one because there's so many games coming out, so many games I got to play that I don't have to play, but I want to play. You know what I mean? And I'm curious how this game's going to do, because we all know this game was in development hell for 7 or 8 years. I remember playing a demo of this game back in, I think it was 2016 at PAX West. And I mean, that was 7 years ago. So it's exciting that it's finally here. I think it's actually shaping up to be a great game. I really hope they can pull it off and make something great, because I think I'm one of the few people that likes the original Dying Light. I understand its criticisms, but I don't know, man. I have rose-tinted glasses when it comes to that game, because playing it on my Xbox 360, I remember just getting immersed into that game, having so much fun exploring. So it seems like this game is going to be right along that. So I'm pretty excited for it. So check out the trailer. If you're even remotely interested in it, I would highly recommend you check out the trailer, because this will kind of give you a good idea of what you'll be doing in this game and how it can kind of look and maybe feel. So now I wanted to move on to that listener response regarding the Xbox Activision deal. And so let me pull the comment here. It's a lengthy comment, but it's a good one. And they made some salient points. And I think we're going to be in agreement a lot of stuff as we go through this. So I want to read the comment and kind of he bullet pointed out 4 different things kind of in response to the 5 things I was responding to. And so we'll go through them one by one. But first of all, hopefully you don't mind me using your first name, Chris. I really appreciate the comment. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to tune in because you bring up some great points here. So let's jump into it. He starts off and says, "Hey man, great video. You seem to have a pretty reasonable counter arguments to those 5 pro acquisition points. Just wanted to throw back some of my thoughts to what you mentioned. Number 1, I agree that it's misleading to say that Activision Blizzard developers want to be acquired. I would disagree with what you said about the deal being bad because it would give Bobby Kotick a get out of jail free card. I don't really think that's relevant at all to the acquisition. If people wanted to stick it to Bobby Kotick, they should be boycotting COD and other Activision Blizzard titles. And that clearly isn't happening if you look at COD sales numbers from Modern Warfare 2. Suggesting that Microsoft is morally wrong for acquiring Activision Blizzard because it benefits Bobby Kotick is a bit weird narrative shift, in my opinion." And first of all, I have to say, if I wasn't trying to make a moralistic argument here. And if I came across like that, I apologize. I simply wanted to point out the irony of it because I find it funny. And I think first of all, I think it's pretty clear that the deal isn't intended, like the point of the deal isn't to give Bobby Kotick an out or a get out of jail free card as I used. I just think that's a side effect of what's happening. And I think it's a side effect that the same people who, parade around with pitchforks are either unintentionally or intentionally overlooking. And so I find it ironic. I think it's as simple as that. But I don't think that it's morally wrong for Activision to make this purchase on the pure basis that it gives Bobby Kotick an outing. I wouldn't try to argue that. And I could see how it comes across as a narrative shift. Not my intention, but I wanted to point out the irony of that because I find it hilarious. Because I find it hilarious because there's so many times we see a lot of gaming media journos pull out the moral card and try to draw these moralistic lines in the sand and extract and force companies into these moralistic positions. And if, depending on which side of that line in the sand that they put in there, they're either with you or against you. And it's so black and white. And I really can't stand that mentality because life isn't as such. And so oftentimes those same people that tend to draw those moralistic lines in the sand are the same people that are extremely hypocritical. And so I wanted to point out the irony in that because I find it funny. Although it isn't the reason, as I think we all know, that Activision is being bought by Microsoft. That's not the intent here. Again, I think it's just an ironic side effect of the deal. But I hear you, and I think you got a salient point there. Moving on, number 2. The acquisition is pro-labor. I'm a software engineer, not part of any labor union, but collective bargaining is great for workers, especially for jobs where the barrier of entry is low, like QA and testers. For positions where a business doesn't worry about turning over employees, unions are a game changer for workers. The reason Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard helps workers is because unionization attempts are more likely to be stifled as a smaller collective group, and because some of Microsoft employees have already unionized. And I think you're right. I think that's a fair point. And again, I understand the benefits of unions, and I think it's a really good point that it's going to benefit, because I think the union that occurred over at Microsoft was a bunch of QA testers that unionized. So to reaffirm that it's good for those kind of, I guess, maybe high turnover, less valuable positions. And I put valuable in quotes there because clearly they are valuable, but I wouldn't, in terms of like ranking, that it's an entry level position, right? Compared to like a senior dev or something like that is what I mean. Again, I think you're absolutely right. But I want to point out two things. One, I, I do think there are downsides to unions, and I'm not going to pretend to list them off and all that stuff, but I think that's important to recognize that that could be a potential. Um, and then the other thing is that while yes, I do think that maybe under the current Activision Blizzard, structure without this acquisition, they're a smaller group, collective group, and can't really get the unionization working. And so this gives them an opportunity to do so maybe under Microsoft, which is a benefit. But I also don't think we can disregard or dismiss the fact, and maybe we can until it actually happens, but I don't think we can, the fact that anytime these acquisitions happen across whatever companies, this doesn't have to be Activision Blizzard, it could be any company. A lot of times there's layoffs, right? Consolidation, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, these things tend to happen. And I've said it before. I wouldn't, if this deal goes through, I would not be surprised if we see some Activision employees lose their jobs, which is a super unfortunate thing. No one wants to see that. So I think it would happen. I think that, and we technically kind of saw that with Bethesda, though I don't think it was solely because of the acquisition. I think it's a couple different things. I think it's a sign of the economy. I think it's we're seeing it across a lot of different tech companies. I think a lot of tech companies are kind of looking at the economy, looking at inflation, and saying, "Hey, we kind of need to trim some fat." But I could easily see it happening with this deal, is because once they get under Xbox's wing, they kind of look around and they can't really take anything away from the COD machine, but maybe there's other areas to where they can be like, maybe we can do without this or do without this, so on and so forth. But so I think it's something to consider, but I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's a fair point around unions and their potential ability to form a larger collective group, because it's already started to happen under Xbox. So I absolutely hear that, and I think you're absolutely right. Number 3, I agree that COD being made available on Nintendo devices probably has less to do with Microsoft acquiring ABK and more to do with the new Nintendo console that hasn't been announced yet. That being said, why is it hard to believe Microsoft wants to pivot to a publisher rather than simply selling consoles and accessories? I think Microsoft wants to have Game Pass on every console eventually. And I think we're in 100% agreement here. Like 100%. As I said before, I think that the whole Microsoft talking about and putting out these contracts with NVIDIA and Nintendo it's all about appeasing the regulators. That's the only reason they did it. And I think whatever the answer is to why Activision isn't putting their games on these platforms, I think is insightful. I think the answer to that is important, but we don't know that answer. And it's interesting that you bring up them wanting to put Call of Duty on a new Nintendo console, because there's that theory going out there. And then there's kind of what I was thinking they would do if this goes through, which is put it on cloud, through cloud. Because there are a lot of kind of, I guess, more modern games that can run on the Switch through cloud services. However, I think it was 2 days ago from the time of this recording that VGC, Video Games Chronicle, reported that basically the title is Microsoft claims it can get Call of Duty Warzone and Modern Warfare 2 running natively on the Switch. And so I think this is interesting. So let me read some of this article here. Quote, last month, Microsoft signed a binding 10-year legal agreement to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo platforms, including full feature and content parity with Xbox. This led to speculate how the company would implement the titles on the aging Switch hardware, especially considering that to date, no Call of Duty game has been released for it. It's been suggested that cloud streaming could be a solution, which is what I thought, or that maybe the deal was in relation to Switch's successor, which is what you brought up. However, in a newly published response to the UK regulator's remedies notice, Microsoft claims it's confident it will be able to make games like Modern Warfare 2 run natively on the platform. Microsoft claims that because Warzone supports PC hardware with GPU cards that were released as far back as 2015, there's no reason it couldn't optimize the 200-player Battle Royale to work on Switch. The Activision development team has a long history of optimizing game performance for available hardware capabilities, it wrote. Microsoft goes on to claim that since the game engine that it powers Warzone is mature and has been optimized to run on a wide range of hardware devices, ranging from the Xbox One console released in 2015 up to the Series X, it could be altered to run on a Nintendo Switch, which was released in 2017. However, this is a clear error since the original Xbox One was released in 2013, not 2015, arguably strengthening Microsoft's point. Microsoft then cites Apex Legends, Doom Eternal, Fortnite, and Crysis 3 as smaller titles that have been successfully ported to Switch using standard techniques. I'll do an ellipsis there. We'll skip a paragraph. At launch, Apex Legends Switch port was dogged with frame rate issues, image quality issues, and limited draw distance, which made the game severely compromised compared to its PC and other console versions. Doom Eternal, which was ported by Panic Button, runs at 30 FPS during gameplay and 20 FPS during cutscenes. It's also a linear style title compared to the massive Warzone, which features up to 150 players. I'll stop there. So I think that's an interesting claim. And it's funny because they talk about full feature and content parity. Content parity, yes, but even if they could get it running on the Nintendo Switch, that is not going to be a a very good version of that game. It's probably it's going to chug. Let's be honest. Maybe they could get to the Modern Warfare 2 campaign, because again, the campaign's pretty linear. You can say, like with Doom, you can probably get that working pretty solidly. But a battle royale with all the network connectivity and all the variables that can go into that, I don't know, man. I think it's a bold claim, though, and I think it's really interesting. And I wanted to bring that up because it's relative. Because again, you and I were thinking about it differently, but Microsoft has confidence they can get it doing. But again, I think the answer to that question is, why doesn't Activision do it now? And I'm trying to, brainstorming, trying to think about answers. Like, maybe is it resources? Like, they don't have money? Well, okay, I guess Xbox and Microsoft can support that because they've got very, very deep pockets. So maybe that's a good thing. Although I think the end product is not going to be very good, as we've seen with some of these other ports that VGC talks about. Or is it something like they just don't see value in that market? Like, they're not going to sell lots of games on those devices. I really don't know. I would say this. I know they've already signed the contract, but if Activision was going to bring anything to Switch, I think they should bring Call of Duty Mobile to Switch. Even though I think they saw something where the Warzone mobile version is going to replace Call of Duty Mobile. At least that's the plan. But maybe that's the idea, to bring the Warzone mobile version over to Switch, just to ensure it's going to work. I don't know. But I find this very interesting. Now, the other thing you pointed out is that, why is it hard to believe Microsoft wants to pivot to a publisher rather than simply selling consoles and accessories? And I agree with you. I have long thoughts going into this current console generation that Xbox's plans are vastly different than PlayStation's, and that their ultimate end goal is to get Xbox Game Pass on everything, including other consoles. Now, I don't know how that works. I don't know if the other consoles like Nintendo and PlayStation would ever do that or want to do that. But I think that's the goal. And I think you're absolutely right. I can totally see a world where Xbox goes into publisher mode. They don't care. I think it's pretty clear that Xbox doesn't care about the box anymore. The actual box. Now, do they support it? Will they make another box? Probably. And yes, they do support their current box. But I think long term, that's not their goal. Their goal is to be a publisher and have Game Pass be the platform rather than the plastic box that you play it on. I think that's clear as day. And the way they're reporting out their monthly active users, that number has been floating around out there. I mean, you have to know that count involves, people logging in through mobile devices, logging through TVs, through PCs, Xbox devices, and so on. That's the idea, is to get their services across all the platforms and then shift from console manufacturer to game publisher and service provider. I think that's absolutely the goal. And I wouldn't argue that, nor was I intending to try to argue that. I definitely think that's the goal. And I was actually thinking about this the other day too, that one of the underreported things a lot of people have been talking about when it comes to this merger is King, the Candy Crush maker, mobile phone game, all that stuff. And it's often, I think, been speculated that that's one of the big pieces that Xbox and Microsoft are after. And I was thinking, I was like, okay, let's say this deal goes through. I wouldn't be surprised to see some version of Game Pass for mobile games for phones, to where you can throw in maybe some of those, King style games in there, almost like Apple Arcade, and have a version of that, maybe plus some of your other more mobile friendly games on there, maybe in its own tier, subscription tier, available for mobile devices. I could easily see that happen. And I think if they eventually do get Game Pass across multiple devices, maybe even a PlayStation, Nintendo, I think we're going to see different versions of Game Pass depending on the device that you go on. I mean, arguably we already see that today, because I think the games offered on PC Game Pass and, Xbox console Game Pass, while there are a lot of overlap, there are some differences. So maybe we'll continue to see more and more differences as more and more devices are brought into the ecosystem. So it'll certainly be interesting. Now, your last point, number 4. You didn't even try to argue that Game Pass wasn't 100% pro-consumer in your video. You mentioned some of the costs and your ideas of why gaming is expensive, but Game Pass is profitable right now, which demonstrates that gaming can be more affordable. Why is that a bad thing? Studios, publishers can sell games like they've always done, and consumers will still have the option to buy any game, whether or not it's on Game Pass. When the music and movie TV industries adopted the streaming model, it actually increased demand for content. There are more jobs now in both industries, better variety of content, and the barrier of entry for musicians, filmmakers is so much lower than it was before streaming. Of course, Microsoft is a business just like Sony, and they're both out to make money, but that doesn't disprove the fact that Game Pass is great for consumers and prove that the Activision Blizzard deal is in any way anti-consumer. And first of all, you're right. I didn't really argue against this pro-consumer thing. And I'll say this. I don't like that terminology because it usually is used in the context of entitlement. And I think a lot of people use it and reference it in a very entitled way. I mean, we hear the term entitled gamers. I think it's absolutely true. And for me personally, as a character trait, I cannot stand entitlement, because I don't believe you're entitled to anything. You got to work for it. So I just have a personal vendetta, I guess, against that terminology. But is that to say that it is a good deal? Game Pass is absolutely a good deal, and I would not argue that. I don't think anyone in their right mind would argue that. I mean, to be able to pay $15, $10, $15, whatever it is, and get access to this massive library of games, a lot of them with some really great titles, yeah, that's tremendous value. I mean, it's the best deal in gaming, right? I'm not here to argue that. But one of my biggest concerns with Game Pass has to do with the way it's changing the economics of the industry. And I have concerns about this because I know they've said Game Pass is profitable, and I've conceded that point, but we still don't know how. And I think that's important, is to understand how. Because I was looking, as I've met, I think I did this in a previous episode when they actually came out about this, when I was actually looking into Netflix and how they've over time become profitable. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I think, two things. One, they found the kind of this inflection point between how much it costs to bring content and how much subscribers they need to find that right balance. And I think that's what Microsoft needs to do. And I'd be curious on what that inflection point is, just I guess from a business and economic standpoint, because they're spending a shit ton of money to get content to Game Pass for however many subscribers that they have. And the problem is with these streaming services, you have to continuously bring new content to the service to not only maintain, but continue to grow your subscriber base. So it's this constant battle to find that perfect inflection point. And the other part about that is that what Netflix does with their original content is, if I remember correctly, in order to show profit on the books, they have to amortize their original content over some sort of period. So basically splitting up the cost of that over a period of time. And maybe that's what Xbox is doing. Because if you think about, let's say a game like Starfield, once that actually comes out, hits Game Pass, in theory, the entire cost of that game is now being added into the economics of Game Pass. And that's a big cost. And my concern and problem comes is that if a service is not being subsidized by something else and you just have this finite pool of subscription money, how does that support all of your development studios and all the additional content that you want to bring for everyone to kind of thrive with this finite pool? And really the only way to grow that pool is through additional subscribers. Now there are other ways to grow money, and that is through either subsidization or through what I think is pretty obvious is going to be microtransactions. And so does that then lead to a shift in how games are made? Are games going to be made in this free-to-play style? And then we're going to see this kind of race to the bottom like we saw in mobile gaming with a bunch of games trying to extract more and more money out of you. I don't want that future, but that's a concern I have when it comes to this model. And I'm really weary of a giant $1 trillion corporation throwing its big dick money around and pushing down the price of games when the price of what it costs to make a big AAA game is going up. And I think one of the things that's interesting about this that is a cause for concern for me is we have the rising costs of games and development, as well as player expectations. I think a lot of players expect games to be really long. They want to get replay value, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a consumer expectation that's kind of changed over time. In order to meet that consumer expectations, you get these big bloated games, you get these big bloated budgets, so on and so forth. And that's inverse to lowering the cost to actually pay them. And so I think it is possible to make games cheaper, but I also think we as consumers and gamers have to reset our expectations on what a video game is. Because, you look at, there's a lot of indie titles out there, right, that are, $20-$30, and those games are freaking fantastic. But you get a lot of people in a, I guess, outside of very hardcore gamers like myself, or someone who's really vested in this industry and kind of the ins and outs of it, who they don't care about that. They kind of see things from like an outsider lens, to where if it's not some big budget AAA game that you can spend 60 to 100 hours in, then it's not worth whatever price. And so it's an interesting dynamic that I'm concerned about how this economic change and this big company trying to push down prices is going to affect everyone else in it. Because without the subsidization and the deep pockets of Microsoft, I don't think, a PlayStation, Nintendo, or even some of these other publishers, big publishers, maybe like an EA or Ubisoft, can afford to do this type of thing. So that's kind of where my mind goes when we about my concerns with Game Pass. But I hear you. And again, I wouldn't try to argue that Game Pass is, anti-consumer or not a good deal, because it's clearly a good deal. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll end it with this, is that another concern I have, because we're a lot of times when Game Pass is brought up, we talk about subscription services and gaming. We liken it to like Netflix and Disney Plus, which I think is fair, because those are kind of the models, if you will. And I look at Netflix, and don't get me wrong, that you're right. The demand for content is huge out there. And maybe it is because the demand with streaming service, they constantly need new content, which then gives people the ability to create content for this. So you could potentially see, jobs increase, job security, stuff like that. But even we have this inflated demand. But I look at a streaming service like Netflix, and there's some great shows on there. You got like Ozark is really good. I love Cobra Kai. That show is fucking great. You have Castlevania series, you have Stranger Things. You've got some bangers on Netflix. But for every banging show, you have about 10 to 15 shows that are kind of just not that great. They're content fodder. And that's what a lot of these streaming services need, is content fodder. Stuff just to kind of feed the masses and throw a lot of, spaghetti in the wall to see what sticks. I don't want that in my video games. I would rather have a handful of really great games that are worthwhile your time, rather than 50 games where only 10% of those, maybe 5% of those are great. So I don't want that mass output of content where the majority of it is very low quality, not that great. Sure, people will check it out, people will play it, and some people will really like it, some people won't, because that's what's on the streaming service. I don't necessarily want that, again, kind of race to the bottom and degradation of the end product and the quality of video games. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's my worry. And I think it could potentially happen if we continue to go down this Game Pass model route. But again, Chris, I want to say thank you for your comment. It was very thoughtful. You made some really good points, and I think we're in agreement on a lot of things. But I think, long story short of it is, I'm just skeptical. And I feel like I'm the only one who's super skeptical of this big corporation with a lot of money kind of coming in and, swinging their big dick money, trying to dictate the economics of the video games industry. I don't know how it's going to pan out. Maybe everything works out, and maybe I've been wrong this entire time. We shall see. Gosh, we're like 50 minutes in, and I haven't even touched the main topic of the show. This is going to be a long one, but I think it's meaty. Good stuff. I love it. I love it when you guys write in some good shit like that. That's awesome. I love responding to that stuff. And like I said, great points. So let's move on to the next story. A big one, Starfield. We got an official release date. It's happening, people. Again, I guess I should say. So Bethesda and Todd Howard came out, provided an update for Starfield. And they said that the game has been delayed to September 6th, 2023. So out of that original first 6-month window of 2023. And this was relayed during a video that Bethesda put out, had Todd Howard talking a little bit. Of course, they showed a little bit of the game. It was only like 2 or so minutes long. And another interesting thing that came out of it is that they dated a Starfield Direct. So they're going to have a specific Starfield Direct showcase for the game on June 11th, directly after the Xbox Games Showcase, which is on the same day. So we got the Xbox Game Showcase, Starfield Direct on June 11th, and then the game is officially coming out September 6th, 2023, which, quite honestly, I think that's a good window for that game. I like that September window. Back in the day, I think it was a 360 era, Halo games would typically come out around that time. I remember Halo 3 came out, I think, around that time, or maybe it was later in September, but I think that's a good window because you're kind of beating the late October, November holiday rush of games. But I think you catch a window kind of like right after summer. I don't know. I just really feel like that's a good window. So I think it's exciting. Now, IGN did a good report on this that talked a little bit about the game and summarized a couple things. So I'll read a little bit of what they put out in regards to this announcement. So they say, in quote, in a new official launch date announcement trailer, Bethesda Todd Howard confirmed that the highly anticipated game will release this year. He says, quote, we have poured ourselves into this game, and even I'm surprised at how much we can pour. It is large. We're playing the game all the time, he explained. Starfield Direct in June will provide a deep dive into the game as Howard continued. There's so much that we still have to show you. The game has many of the hallmarks that you'd expect from us, but it's also a very unique experience. End quote. So I'll leave it at that. I think this is pretty exciting. Now, this is the second delay, major delay, I should say, we've seen with Starfield. I think the game was originally set to come out November 11th, 2022 last year, and then it was delayed to the first half of 2023, and now delayed again to September. And so I feel like it's easy to harp on Xbox. Again, we know about the mismanagement of their studios, their first-party teams, and kind of how they've really mismanaged their portfolio. But I got to be honest with this one, I don't think that's the case here. I mean, maybe there's a part of it, but I think more so there's a couple different things at play here. I think first and foremost, I like to think that they learned from Fallout 76 and the disastrous launch that was, and really the kind of tarnish that they put on the Fallout brand with that game. And so I think they want to take their time to get it right. I don't think they want to repeat of Fallout 76. So they've got to take their time and get this game right. I think another thing is this game is hugely important. Like, it is vitally important that they get this right for both Bethesda and Xbox. Like, this is now Xbox's flagship title. This is the title everyone is looking forward to. This is going to be the title that I kind of feel like makes or breaks Xbox, especially this generation. Like, everything is riding on this. And so again, they have to get it right. And the last thing that I think is definitely a big part of this is that this game is massive. It's reportedly massive. They talked about this game being over 1,000 planets, which in my opinion is way too big, but such is the case. I got to imagine it's quite the task to fill it up with as much content as possible, make sure it's running optimally, and that kind of every little corner of this massive galaxy they're putting together works. So that's probably a big feat. So I think those are more the contributing factors than kind of Xbox maybe mismanaging this game in the studio, because this game has been in development long before Bethesda was even acquired by Xbox. And every time I gotta say, every time I see this game, it gets me excited for it, just in the sense that I'm such a sucker for like sci-fi. And I kind of get, when I was looking at this, and every time I see this game, and the music is great, by the way, I kind of get Interstellar vibes. And I just, say what you want about that movie, I really enjoyed it, but I kind of like that almost realistic sci-fi kind of mess with your mind, think about space in various different ways. And I kind of get the sense that maybe that game is going to go this direction. I'm very curious on what the story is going to be for this game, and if the scope that they talked about with the 1,000 planets is actually going to be worth your time, or if it's all just bloat. I hope it's the former rather than bloat, but we'll see. I think it'd be cool to see, like, if there's going to be aliens that you encounter, maybe alien races, or if there's going to be some sort of like alien threat that you're going to be fighting against. I don't really know too much about the story or really what story beats are out there. Another thing I think would be really cool is if like you're kind of like a space pioneer and you're exploring new worlds, uncharted worlds, and trying to understand, and maybe part of the story involves that. I think that would be cool. Again, I'm such a sucker for sci-fi that this is stuff that really draws me in and kind of gets me curious. Another thing I've been thinking about with this game is that Bethesda's traditionally known for doing pretty awesome collector's editions. I know for the previous Fallout games, even Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4, and even Fallout 76, they did awesome collector's editions. And I'm a sucker for those. And for their big games, especially Elder Scrolls and all that, they usually do a collector's edition. But now that this is a Game Pass title, you can't imagine they're expecting to sell many copies. They'll sell them, but that's not the goal here. It's for Game Pass. Are they going to do that? Is it even necessary? Would people even buy it? I don't know. I'm just curious how they're going to handle that now that their focus is on Game Pass. And lastly, one of the things I was thinking about with this announcement and kind of the excitement around it is like, could you imagine where Xbox would be if they didn't have Bethesda? I mean, again, Xbox is riding on this title as their flagship title for the Xbox brand. If they didn't have that, sure, they'd still get the game and maybe they'd have some marketing rights to it. But when you talk about exclusives and really console sellers or Game Pass sellers, as you might call them, I don't know what they have. They haven't really been delivering that much, which is the big criticism about Xbox, right? It's kind of wild to think about, and think about how much is riding on this, and how much value I guess Bethesda has delivered them, especially with like Hi-Fi Rush, able to bring Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo soon to the platform. It's kind of big. It's kind of a big deal. And that's what got me thinking about our main topic, which is this segue, as I take another drink of my beverage here. And that's what got me thinking about these 5 games and asking, where are they? So let's transition into that and talk about, where are these 5 games for Xbox? And I picked these 5 games out because I think they're some of the most prominent ones that I think a lot of people are excited for and really interested in. I'm certainly interested in a couple of them myself. And so how I want to do this is I want to go through, I'm going to answer 3 main questions about each of them, which is, when was it originally announced? When was it last shown off? And do we have an estimated release date or window? And as we go through each of those, I'll talk about each game, but I think you'll start to see a pattern. And I'll call that out at the end here because I see a pattern and I think it's very interesting. And I think it's obvious maybe what the solution is. So, number one, Hellblade 2. So Hellblade was originally released, the first one in 2017, came to all platforms. Hellblade 2, though, as we know, will be Xbox exclusive. And this game was originally announced back in 2019. And it was last shown off at the Game Awards in 2021, where actually I think they did, I have written down here, it was a 6-minute, it felt longer than that, but a 6-minute gameplay trailer demo that they showed off, fighting this like big giant dude. And there was a lot going on. It was very graphically beautiful. And that was the last time we saw it. And it's now been over a year since then. And so I think a lot of folks, myself included, think this has got to be like a late 2023 release, maybe like November. Excuse me. But I've been thinking like, what's going on with this game? Like genuinely, what is going on? Now, I did find an article from Games Radar that stated back in June 2021, the studio gave an update for the game and they explained it had yet to enter in full production, which is kind of wild considering it was announced in 2019. Maybe that's telling. So there's a little nugget of information there. And the other thing I was discovering about this game, they're using Unreal Engine 5, which is a newer tool set. So maybe that's an impediment to development as they're trying to get used to the tools. And I think they're, as they did, which is one of the fascinating things about the first game, is they're using like the latest audio and video technologies. So there's a lot of technological prowess that's going into this game, which again could lead to its lengthy development cycle. So, that's another factor to take in here. But I gotta ask, like, what's going on? Like, why would you show off a lengthy demo at the Game Awards in 2021 and then just go radio silent? I think when you show that off, I think expectations say that this game is probably closer than it really was. And I think that's a misstep in their calculation here. Now, one of the things I didn't realize is some of the other games they'd put out over the last few years, nothing of major consequence, but notable because it's taking time away from Hellblade 2. And that is, I think they did work on the Vader Immortal VR game, or the VR series, I should say. And they also, and I forget this because I never even thought this game was even worth my time, but Bleeding Edge, they released that back in March of 2020, which is that multiplayer game. Totally forgot about that. I didn't know that's a thing. And so I was curious on like, how well did that game do? Like, cause I don't even really remember it. Has a Metacritic score of 66 and a user score of 6.2. So not that great. But I think that's one of the things I guess you can give credit to Microsoft for is they kind of allow their studios to go out, do these other projects, and try out other things, kind of, and don't really, for the most part, keep them tied to something. However, I think there's something to be said that, like, to keep your people in line with projects that are most likely fans are going to expect for them. Like, I feel like Hellblade was a massive success. So why are we waiting 6 or 7 years for Hellblade 2? Like, I know the devs want to go into other stuff, but like, if you're Microsoft, you got to say, we're making Hellblade 2 exclusive to Xbox. It's going to be a big game. We need this, and we got to do it in a timely manner. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. But Hellblade 2, man, I'm very surprised we haven't seen or heard much of this game recently, but maybe that'll change. I would expect that to change in this upcoming summer showcase. Number 2 is Avowed from Obsidian. And as I was reading about this game, one of the things I didn't know, and again, I don't pay too much attention to some of these games, but this game is set in the same world as Pillars of Eternity. God, I can't talk. Now, I've never played Pillars of Eternity, but it's funny. I actually have the first game, the complete edition, on PlayStation, because I remember hearing a lot of good things about this game. I think it got really good review scores. And it is one of those kind of CRPGs, I believe they are, or isometric D&D type style. But it looks so good. I'm such a sucker for like this dark fantasy stuff. That's why I bought it. That's why it's still in the shrink wrap, because I don't know when I'm going to find time to play it. But god dang, I would love to play it because it looks so damn cool. And apparently is really good. But I didn't know it was in the same universe. So I think that's really, really cool. Now, this game was originally announced back in 2020, I think at that showcase. It was, and I don't think it's been shown off from what I can tell since that original announcement. Maybe little trickets of news in here and there, but nothing official in terms of another showing. For the estimated release on this, I think a lot of people thought 2023, and I think 2024 is more realistic given all the various projects that Obsidian has been kind of working on. We know that they released Grounded 1.0, I think late last year, September, I think it was, which they've been working on Grounded for a while. Apparently that's a fun game, not really my style of game, but there's something there. Again, that's one of those kind of off the beaten path Microsoft projects that they let them do. And they also had Pentiment, which I've been wanting to try. And it looks really cool, beautiful art style. So that's another one. So we know they've worked on those games, and we also know there's an Outer Worlds sequel in the works. But outside of that, I would think it's all hands on deck now with those other two games kind of out the door. Maybe have a smaller team do some support on Grounded. That Avowed should be the primary focus, I would think, for this studio. So I think 2024 is more realistic, kind of given their workload, their output, where things are going. Now, I did find an article from thegamer.com back from August 2021 that says Avowed, Outer Worlds 2, and an unannounced game are in playable states. So they have 3 games in the works. And maybe at that time that was Pentiment. So there's that. But they're in playable states, so they are making good progress. And so maybe that is indicative that we could see Avowed sooner than later. Something just tells me kind of with the way things are kind of unfolding towards the second half of 2023, that Avowed's going to be a 2024 one. I also know that it's Obsidian. They did Fallout New Vegas. I think there's a lot of people that want either a New Vegas remake or a sequel, which would be so dope. I mean, I love Fallout New Vegas. That game is phenomenal, so good, and it's so cool to see Obsidian and Bethesda now under one kind of roof, to where that's a potential that could happen. Though I don't think it's in the cards, if I'm being quite honest. I don't think it's going to happen. But Avowed looks really cool, and given that Elder Scrolls 6 is like probably a decade away, if we're being honest, I think Avowed's going to be the game that a lot of fantasy fans are going to be looking forward to. This is one I'm personally looking forward to. And again, it kind of makes me want to jump into this, even though I got 15,000 other games I want to play, because it's in the same universe. That's freaking dope. Like I was so taken back by that. I was like, that is really, really cool. All right. I'm going to take a drink of my Red Bull here. All right, number 3, Everwild. So for those of you who don't know, and I didn't really know too much about this game, so I had to look this up. Everwild's an MMO style game set in a fantasy universe. And I think we don't really know much about this game, to be quite honest. I think a lot of folks expect it to be similar to Sea of Thieves, because this is done by Rare, who did Sea of Thieves. Presumably it's going to be a similar style game. I think that's fair. Now, this game was originally announced back in 2019. They did release a trailer in, I think it was 2020. That's when it was last shown off. And since then, nothing. It's been radio silence. Now, what's the estimated release date? I think there was an article from Games Radar that this game had been allegedly rebooted. So, and that was back in, I think 2021, if I remember correctly. However, Xbox Game Studios head Matt Booty said that report was more definite, a little more extreme. And I think what he's implying there is that maybe there were some decision shifts, not necessarily like a full-on reboot, but maybe just some shifts in some of the decisions about the game that took a turn and affected development in that direction rather than like a full-on reboot. So maybe it was a misinterpretation with the reporting, but kind of makes you think like what, regardless of what it was, what pivoted, what changed? And is it something that they maybe learned from Sea of Thieves? Is it maybe a shift in kind of the the genre, or are there games that have maybe come out? I don't know, but I would not expect this game for a while. I maybe we'll get an update at the showcase this summer, but I would expect this to be no earlier than 2024. I think, Sea of Thieves is pretty successful. They've been working on that game for a while. It's amassed a pretty solid following. This game, it's been in development for a while, and I feel like, maybe it wasn't a full-on reboot, but some decisions were made to kind of shift directions or change some things, which maybe set them back a little bit. So I don't know. Just the little information we have about this game, I get a sense that like this isn't going to be ready for a while. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. Number 4, Perfect Dark, the reboot. And this game is being made by a brand new Xbox formed studio, The Initiative, which was formed back in 2018. Now, they originally announced this game back at the Game Awards in 2020, which I remember was pretty exciting. Last they've shown off, I couldn't find anything. I don't think they've released anything since that original announcement from Game Awards in 2020. And so the estimated release date is nobody knows. Now, this game, I think, has been in development hell. So there was a report back in 2021 from Video Games Chronicle that stated as much as half of the core dev team left during production, which is huge. And this is what caused them to call in Crystal Dynamics, who's now owned by the Embracer Group, for support. So this game is being co-developed by Crystal Dynamics and the Initiative, which is pretty wild. Now, it's not uncommon for studios to kind of work together and you get some support studios in there. That's not uncommon. But what I think is weird is you get like it's just a weird marriage between Crystal Dynamics and Xbox, and it just seems really weird. And I think it's indicative to bring in such a high profile studio, because usually support studios aren't this high profile. I think that's indicative that things are not looking good. And I think the staff changes is also indicative of that. VGC also reported back in March of 2022 that they had a wave of senior departures that occurred over the last year, which is could be part of that core dev staff. But they stated they lost specifically their game director, design director, and 3 former God of War designers, which is probably pretty significant, especially your game director. That's a big deal. That's huge. I mean, for a game director to walk away mid-development, mid-production, that's not a good sign. And so they said this left the studio with less than 50 people, according to LinkedIn. So I think this is a prime example of Xbox's mismanagement, because this is an Xbox birth studio, and this is just not good news. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happened, but all signs are leading to this studio not being up to the task. Whoever's running the show, you probably need to reevaluate it. And it's unfortunate because I think Perfect Dark does have ties to Xbox, because I think it was an Xbox launch window title with like Perfect Dark 360, or I forget the title of that one, but there was a Perfect Dark game, although I don't know how well it did. I never played it. But I think with Rare being owned by Xbox, I think it's just makes sense to not to have Rare do it, but to have this title kind of under your kind of ecosystem of games. But it's just unfortunate that like they can't get their shit together. And it's been years since we've seen this game or even heard anything of it outside of people leaving the studio. I don't know. I'm not optimistic about this. We'll see if this game ever comes out, if we get an update on it, but kind of unfortunate with a pretty big I don't know how big the IP is or how even relevant it is. I mean, I know on the Nintendo 64 days, I loved Perfect Dark. Actually, one of the things I liked about it was being able to play multiplayer by yourself against bots. And selfishly, I wish more multiplayer games would do this, so it gives players a chance to kind of ease into multiplayer before jumping in with live players who have been playing for however long, just, getting all sweaty and try hard. And I digress there, but Perfect Dark ain't looking good. Lastly, number 5 is Fable. Fable 4, Fable reboot. I think it's more of a reboot, but with this game, now it's been over a decade since we've seen the last Fable game, Fable 3. Or actually, maybe it was Fable. I know they did that Connect game, but the last like core title was Fable 3, and that was kind of a lukewarm reception if I remember correctly. Fable 2 seemed to be the peak. That's the one I've played, and that game was freaking awesome. And one of the things I didn't realize is that, so it's being made by Playground Games, who did I think the Forza Horizon series. And they hired a crew of 170 people specifically for Fable, just for that game, which is massive. That's a big chunk of folks. Now, this game was originally announced back in 2020, and then we haven't seen anything since, from what I can tell. Nothing's been shown off since then. And I think a release is still a ways off given the lack of information. Could be wrong, because they got Forza Horizon 5 out in 2021. They're doing some DLC, which isn't going to take the whole team. So I imagine most of the team is probably working on Fable. Now, there were some reports that development had been restarted, but that was debunked. So there is that. But maybe like what was it? Like Everwild, maybe there was some sort of decision change or some sort of shift in direction, and that's where that kind of report originally came from. I don't know, but it's kind of weird that it's just zero updates since its announcement. And Fable at one time was a pillar of the Xbox brand. And I think those games are great. Now, I've only played a little bit of the first game. Haven't played the third. Actually, I think I started the third one, but only a little bit of it. But I loved the second one. That game was awesome. I think I got all the achievements in that game too. Like I was just so in love with it. And so I think, especially now, there's definitely room for like some sort of Fable reboot to the charm of that game. Some of the mechanics, I think, work into today's world. I think you spruce up the combat a little bit. I think you tell a compelling story. And I think you have a good product there that I think a lot of people would really enjoy. So I certainly think there's room for this game. It's just weird. It's kind of just out there. And it's also weird that it's being developed by, a Forza Horizon studio. Not to say that they can't do it, but you just wouldn't think of that. Now, they did hire a bunch of help, of course, so maybe it's not that weird. I don't know. I could be wrong. So who knows when we'll even see that game again. Again, maybe the summer showcase. Who knows? But out of all these 5 games, one of the things I noticed with all of them is that they were announced 3 to 4 years ago, between 2019 and 2020. Every single one of them, which is wild to me. And that tells me you were way too early in announcing these games. Way too early. Especially if you're not going to have anything concrete. And this isn't just an Xbox problem. Other publishers and devs do this too. I can't stand it. I actually like the window we got between Fallout 4's announcement and at E3 to when it was released is perfect. And I can understand maybe not every game can do that, but I like these shorter marketing cycles. I just prefer them instead of like, but then they did the opposite with Elder Scrolls 6, which we're not going to see that for like another decade. So I can't stand that. I hate when they announce games way too early, and we're just because when they do that, you've set the expectations that that game's coming, and I think a lot of people think the game's probably farther along than what they did. Because my guess is when a lot of these games were shown off, since they were all CG trailers, they were all maybe in like pre-production. And I think at the time, Xbox was kind of doing it to generate hype for the brand. They were still, turning things around, getting ready for the Series X and Series S launch. So they needed something to show. And I think it's starting to backfire because every year it's like everyone's like, where's Avowed? Where's this? Where's that? And it just kind of makes it more disappointing for fans, which sucks. And I can see, I'm not the biggest Xbox fan, not as much as I used to be during the 360 days, but I want to see them succeed. And a couple of these I'm super excited for. Like I'm really interested in Avowed. I think a Fable reboot could be really enticing. And Hellblade 2, I'm looking forward to that. I think Hellblade 1 was great. So there's definitely something to be excited for as an Xbox fan, but way too early in my opinion. I don't know why you would do that. So hopefully they learn their lesson And hopefully we get some updates on a couple of these games, especially Val. That's probably the number one I'm looking forward to. So that's all I got. Let me know what you guys think about these games. What the hell's going on over at Xbox? Have they started to turn the ship around? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate your love, kindness, and support for the show. Kind of a longer episode, but again, I think it was really meaty. We got to talk a lot about Xbox. And, as I was looking into this, I got to say, I do have some optimism for Xbox, regardless of whatever happens with Game Pass and all that stuff. I want them to start to come out with these games and do it in a more consistent manner because I want to be excited about Xbox and the brand. I kind of miss that. And I have such fond memories of the Xbox 360 days that I kind of miss that. It's very nostalgic to me. So I'm probably always going to have some soft spot for like that era of Xbox because it was so integral to my life and my modern love of video games to a certain degree. So yeah. But either way, I want to hear from you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the topics. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Ah, man. I will say this. Leave us kind reviews. Share it with your friends. Help me get the word out there. The support's been really great lately. Downloads have been going really well. So couldn't have done that without you guys. So thank you for that. Exciting stuff is NCAA March Madness. I'm super stoked for that. I don't know if you guys are about, March Madness and basketball and stuff like that, but that's just around the corner. Spring's just around the corner. Baseball's around the corner. Lots of games are coming out. It's a good time, man. Lots to look forward to. So hope you guys all have a great week out there. I'll talk to you next week. Until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.